Before we dive into this conversation, I want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this podcast episode, Fleet Feet Treasure Valley. If you're a runner, you already know how important the right gear is. Whether you're training for your next ultra, someone who is just getting started and doesn't know where to begin, or you're a seasoned athlete out hitting the roads and trails and know exactly what you want, Fleet Feet Treasure Valley has got you covered. Their well-trained and passionate team knows shoes, nutrition, hydration, running apparel. Really, they just know it all. It's amazing. But more importantly, they listen and they take the time to make sure you get exactly what you need so you can keep moving forward. With 2 Treasure Valley locations to serve you, it's more than just a running store, it's a community. So stop by Fleet Feet at the Village in Meridian or pop into the Nampa store out here in the 2C and tell them Jake from Run From The Norm sent you. You can also visit the website to learn more, which I will add to the show notes. Fleet Feet Treasure Valley. Our goal is to help you move pain-free. Howdy, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Run From The Norm podcast, where we celebrate dreaming bigger, pushing harder, and embracing adventure one day at a time. Today's guest is Kylee Wiscombe, and let me tell you, this conversation's a powerful one. We sat down, hit record, and what unfolded was a deep dive into resilience, mental health, and the power of movement. Kylee's journey into running actually started with overwhelming self-doubt, but through patience, persistence, and the right mindset shifts, she found herself not only loving running, but using it as a tool to rebuild herself through some of her and her family's biggest challenges. We get into her work with Greater, a nonprofit she founded that is dedicated to mental health advocacy and how movement, whether it's running, hiking, or just getting outside, has been one of the biggest game changers in her recovery. From the creation of Top of Tamarack, a mental health and suicide prevention event, to leading Trail Fridays, an all-inclusive trail running and hiking group that partners with today's sponsor, actually, Fleet Feet Treasure Valley, Kylee is helping to build a space where people feel seen, supported, and stronger through embracing a love of movement. This episode's a testament to why we keep showing up, why we run, why we push forward, and why we surround ourselves with people who lift us up. And with that, I think you know what time it is. It's time to run from the norm. Kylee Wiscombe, we've been having a good chat here, and I wish we would have hit record earlier, but we met about 5 minutes ago, sat down, and I'm really enjoying our conversation. And just to start, I'd like to know a little bit more about you. Where did you grow up? What were you like as a kid? Where did you go to school?
Well, I was a lady caveman. I grew up in Kuna. My husband also grew up in Kuna. And we didn't travel far. We lived in Kuna, then we both went to school at Boise State. So we've stayed in the area for all our lives.
Back when Kuna was, we were talking, when Kuna was farmland and it was, a ways out there and 2-lane road.
Yes, so small. It's amazing how I used to say that the only thing can survive in Kuna is churches and bars. So they've gone beyond that.
Yes, they have. It's growing like crazy. Well, what got you into running?
Well, I was never a runner. In fact, my husband, we started dating when he was a senior in high school and I was a freshman at Boise State. And he was the runner. He was the star athlete out in Kuna. He was like a 3-time state champion.
Oh, wow.
He ran for Boise State. Yes. So I say he has God-given talent in running. And when we started dating, I would say, ugh, why do you want to do that? That sounds horrible.
Go do something fun.
Yeah. In fact, I tried out for track in junior high. And I was thinking about this as, when running came into my life.
What that progression looked like.
Yeah. And actually trying out for track became a huge source of rejection for me because I wasn't, and this may be in a lot of places, but when you try out for track and you don't have a lot of talent at it in junior high, and I'm sure this is based on past childhood stuff too, I wouldn't say I was great at it. So they have you try all these different, to find where
you fit.
Yeah, find where you fit. And every single one, I was terrible. Like I was not keeping up. And I feel like the coaches at that time were kind of focused on who's the fast ones, right? Who are the ones that are going to succeed at this? And so by the end of tryouts, I quit. I didn't have someone that came and said, wow,
let's work with you.
Yeah. I didn't have someone that says, I believe in you, like that you can still do this. So it was, I think, a sense for me of, I'm not good at running. I can't do that. Like I stink at this. And so I didn't again try running until my husband was running in college. And honestly, I had gained a bunch of weight studying for the CPA exam. And every time I tried to go running, my lungs would just be on fire. Like it just, and I wouldn't make it.
You didn't get out and just find the magic immediately.
No. In fact, my husband, he would run with me. And what's funny is looking back at the time, we were running very slowly. He was slowing way down, but it was still in the beginning too fast for what my heart was able to handle and what my body was able to handle. And so I would quit. I would say, oh, I'm going to try this running thing. And then I would quit. And fortunately, I had an uncle actually I'm very close with, and his wife completed suicide when I was 18.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And so...
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And he was a football athlete in high school and college, but he never had really taken up running. And so part of his healing process was he began running, but he used a heart rate monitor. And so he worked up from running nothing to a marathon using a heart rate monitor. He kept after me, Kylee, you need to try a heart rate monitor. You're pushing yourself too hard and you're burning out. Like you need to just try this heart rate monitor. And lo and behold, I tried it. And my husband is so supportive. I call him the golden boy. Everyone loves Miles. And he's just such a gifted and humble athlete. But he would say, well, let's go to the green belt and run. And I'd say, I can't run there. People will see me there.
I don't want anyone to see me.
Yeah. And I started out, couldn't run a mile. I couldn't run a mile straight. And
and that's not to stop you there. You touch on a good point, because that's where I think a lot of people struggle when they come into running. You get motivated because you see other people out doing it, and they're running a marathon or a half marathon or a 5K, or as we've talked a little earlier, ultra marathons and all these things. And people go out and they try it that once or twice and it doesn't immediately stick, or they don't find success, or they hurt and they can't breathe and they quit. So it sounds like similar to what you went through is
yes.
It didn't just automatically fall into place where your breathing is where you want it to be and you found your pace.
No, that you runner's high. No, that was not happening in the beginning. That was,
runner, I'm going to die.
Yeah. There were several things that helped and that eventually I got over the hump. And the heart rate monitor was the very first thing, because it would beep if I was too low, if my heart rate was too low or too high. It was always too high. And so it would make me run painfully slow, but I wouldn't burn out.
Sure.
And so in the beginning, it became this goal setting. I started and I probably ran the first mile that I ever did in like 15, 16 minutes and at that very slow pace.
And how old were you at this point?
So it was right after my undergrad, so probably 22, 23-ish. So then I set a goal of, I want to do a 5K. Miles did all these races. And
what's he running in college? You said he ran in college.
So he ran cross country and track, and he did distance. So he did like the 10K on the track, which I don't know how people do that. And then cross country.
And so he's out training consistently as well, and you're seeing him head out the door to get his runs in?
His little blue shorts and, the ones right here. And so he's running a ton. He's studying engineering and he's running, and that was basically his life. But when I started running, it was at the end of college. I was studying for the CPA exam. So I think he was just finishing his undergrad. So I think his college days were done. And funny enough, I'm going on a sidetrack, but I would sign up for a race. I started really falling in love with the goal setting that came with running races. That, I want to...
You've got the target on the calendar. Now, how do I work backwards to make sure I can accomplish the goal?
Yes. Yeah. And Miles used to tell me that running without a race is, what did he say? It would be like practicing baseball, but never playing a game.
It helps.
It helps to have that motivation. And so he, though, would be stuck in this college competitive mindset. Right. Like I'd sign up for a race and say, hey, will you do this with me?
And you're looking for completion.
Yes. And whereas he, if he hadn't been training for it, then oh no, I'm not ready. Like I have to, I have to compete. I have to do well. So
he's got these aggressive targets.
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was really me. He would run with me or run circles around me. He wasn't doing the races at the time. But I set my first goal of I just want to be able to run a whole 5K. Well, the first goal was run a mile. And then I was like, wow, I did that.
How long did that take? to where you were comfortable with it?
Well, the comfort came later. In fact, Miles, I remember after a month or two of consistent running, like, when is this going to get easier?
When does it get fun?
Yeah. And he's like, in a really long time. He didn't sugarcoat it. You got to keep going.
Build
and
the
eventually,
base.
And so that's what I would tell people eventually once I did enjoy running is there's a hump and you just, you got to keep going and you got to get over the hump.
It's not immediate.
Yeah. But there's lots of things that can help you get over that hump, which I've learned over the years. But man, I did that first 5K and I didn't have a time goal. I just wanted to be able to run the whole thing, 3.1 miles.
No walking.
Like, no walking. That was my first goal is I want to be able to run this whole thing. And I can't tell you how incredible that felt to run 3.1 miles like that. Felt so good to me that I had set this goal. And then I fell in love with that process. Well, wow. If I could do that, maybe I could do it in 12-minute miles. I started focusing on the
small incremental improvements now.
Yeah. And okay, well, I did that. I made that 12 miles. Maybe I could do it in any amount. So I kept working, I can run faster. And then I started, maybe I could do a 10K. Maybe I could do a half marathon. And so I worked up from not being able to run 1 mile in 15 minutes to being able to run a marathon in 4 hours. Like
nice.
My pace came down drastically. And
how long was it until you did your first marathon?
Gosh, it took me a while to work up to there, several years. I'm one.
So you were patient with it.
Oh, I was, because I have friends that are like from 0 to let's do 100-miler.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible. And those people, like one of my best friends is just, it's incredible to me. But I'm more like, I want to slowly go up. So, I want
and you want to set yourself up for success and increase your likelihood of success by having these incremental improvements and step your way to it.
Yeah. So each one, once.
I wish I was more patient. Yeah, that's my wife's superpower, not mine.
Well, I think, and I need that. I need to work up slowly and slowly, from a 5K to 10K to a half to a full 50K and up. So
as you're building, are you still in this mindset of I have to run every step? Because that's something that comes up a lot in some conversations where people feel like, if I walk, then it's not a success and it wasn't a great run. Or you'll see people that are hopping at a stoplight because they feel like if they stop their movement, the whole thing is garbage at that point. Are you still feeling like I have to run the entirety of each one of these races, or is it just getting to the end and having that completion?
Yeah, my running now has completely changed that mindset. But then...
And you enjoy it. I see all the pictures with your big smiles.
Yes. And then I think that was maybe Miles influenced me on that of, hey, you run. And I ran all the uphills and you recover on the downhill, but you don't walk. There's no walking. And I was much more of a road runner. I started running a race a month. And and both Miles and I did. And it was an incredible part of our life and a
new bonding experience for you.
Yeah, we would travel.
Oh,
we did
awesome.
All these rock and roll half marathons and we did Big Sur and it was such an incredible, happy part of our lives. But yes, to answer that question, at that time, there was no walking. I didn't sign up for something further than I could potentially. It was a SMART goal, right? Yeah. Like I know that I could run this. And then I would train like Roby Creek. Every hard thing or every failure is such a learning lesson. And
that's the way I position them too, is I try to take away the failure and I say it's a learning opportunity.
Yeah. And like Roby Creek, the first time we did Roby Creek, I had 2 goals and I wanted to be able to run the whole thing. And then I wanted to come in under 2 hours. And I could go off on a whole story of learning lesson on that, but I ended up walking at the last quarter mile to the top. And it's
like you go around a turn and there's so many, if you don't know the course, there's so many false summits at the end. You think, okay, it's this last turn I'm here, and you go around. Oh, wait, no, there's another one.
Yeah. I had the physical ability at the time. This is before I had kids. This is probably the peak of my more road running. And, we trained. Actually, it wasn't. I had Bryson, my oldest at the time, was a couple years old. And we have a funny story about we didn't have childcare for him. So we pushed his stroller up and Miles actually pushed it up and I pushed it down. Everyone was looking at me like, oh my gosh,
That's hardcore.
I don't know why I'm pushing it on the downhill.
So let me ask you, because I have my opinion, but what do you think is harder, the uphill or the downhill?
I mean, now doing a lot of trails for me down, like physically, I think, running uphill is harder, but the trickiness of trails and downhill, I have a fear factor. And so that's actually my weaker side is
Which
running.
I think it is a lot of people, because I think it seems like a lot of people train a lot on the uphills and they don't train as much on the downhill. And there's such a technique and a skill set to downhill, because if you're not careful, downhill is really what trashes your body.
Yeah.
So you're saying you had the stroller and you're dealing with the downhill. I mean, that's not an easy downhill.
But
that's rough. That is hardcore.
Yeah. We did take that Bob stroller off trail, and we have some pretty funny pictures of places that we took that thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I was really fit at the time. I felt like I was very fit. And so when I was prepared to run the whole thing, I know that I could have. But when I got to, there's all those negative things coming in your head. Oh, it's really hot today. Oh, I started out too fast.
I'm getting tired.
Yeah. And pretty soon everyone around me is walking. And before I knew it, I started walking. And it was just this, failure. That was important to me for some reason. That was so important to me at the time. And then, I came in, I finished the race. I finished in 150 and well under my goal. So that's happy. But I had this hard time celebrating for a little bit.
Because you didn't run every step.
Yeah, because I was so focused on that was the goal. But what it did for me is, that failure, which I'm proud of that time now. I couldn't do 150 on Roby now. So much has transpired since then. And that's from starting out running a 15, 16-minute mile to being able to do that.
That's huge.
It's huge. And I felt very proud of myself for that. But I was so disappointed. But it made me such a stronger hill runner because I realized that walking didn't actually, it wasn't that I physically needed to walk.
Right.
It's that I allowed the mental stuff to say, here, walk. Because after that, I ran my first marathon. And again, my goal there was I'm not walking. And it made me, I realized that I didn't have to walk, that I could get through it with
almost
walking.
Think it's extremely important to have those moments. Because I think if you're always just having success, you don't learn the same lessons, obviously. But I think you take away more from those, the times where it's not exactly what you wanted, and you have to find that strength to push through and still keep going and not just quit for one.
For sure.
But still get to the end, which, obviously was the ultimate goal.
Yeah. And that's true in running and in life, right? That in our, I say that we're climbing mountains, literal ones, but also figurative ones. And there's lots of failures, and it's figuring out, okay, what went wrong? Yeah. What went wrong, or what can I change? How can I make this better next time?
That's a great perspective to have on it. And so it's not just like we're saying, a failure and you kind of throw it away and I don't want to do this again.
Right.
You take something from it, you dissect it, and what can I move forward? So as you're doing this and you're running, are you still running with a heart rate monitor?
No. I only did that really to get me over the hump. And now I pay attention to my heart rate. I took a good long hiatus from running, mental health struggle really led to me losing running for about 7-8 years. I did a race here and there, but I really lost running for a long time.
What led up to that?
A mental health crash. I was, after the birth of my second kiddo, Trevor, it was shortly after he was born that I started struggling with my mental health.
And you didn't have any issues that you're aware of, at least before that?
No, I can look back and see periods of when my mood has elevated, and I might have a blah day, but Kylee, pre this time, I never struggled with any sort of suicidal ideation. I never struggled with long periods of depression. In fact, I didn't understand depression. I was the one that was choose happiness, and, and I didn't get it. So it was really hard when I started struggling with it. And it was probably, 2 weeks after Trevor was born. And now looking back, there was a lot going on. There was hormones, there was, a lot of things happening. But when he was about 18 months old and my oldest was, so about 4 or 5, I really, really started struggling. There were periods where my mood would either be very elevated and I'd be high on life and, taking on
feel like you can fly.
Oh yeah. I feeling like I could fly. I had started a new business and, I'm
going to conquer the world.
Yes, exactly. And I added a lot of stress to my life. So much stress. I had so much stress in my life. So I would be really high, and then I would hit the skids, and I couldn't get out of bed for days.
The higher the high, the lower the lows.
Oh, 1,000%. I've totally learned that now. So we started, my husband, was kind of like, what's going on here? What is happening? Because it really, prior to that,
it impacts everybody around you.
It really does.
Yeah.
And he was just like to see me, struggling so much. He was doing what an engineer does, looking for
trying to fix it.
Yeah, trying to fix it.
My wife gives me so much crap about that. She's like, I just need you to listen sometimes. I don't need you to fix it.
Right.
But yeah, we want to, especially if it's our partner, somebody we love. And
yeah. He's, so he's grasping at straws, starts Googling and comes up with bipolar disorder.
I've got a spreadsheet. Let me show you. Let me show you what I came up with.
Right, exactly. And so, he came and says, maybe you're bipolar. And I was so deeply offended.
Yeah.
I was like, that is
how dare you?
So rude, because my frame of reference for bipolar disorder was I had a grandmother who was diagnosed manic depressive. And that looked very different from what
you felt like you were experiencing.
Yeah, what I felt like I looked like. And also I think maybe some ego or just some lack of knowledge.
Were you trying to hide it, you think?
No, because it never occurred to me that I could have a mood disorder or that I could have, been bipolar. And so I wasn't trying to hide it, but I was just
struggling with it.
Yeah. And at the time, now a lot of people or mental health is being talked about so much more. But at the time, that's a crazy person.
There's still a stigma.
Yeah.
And especially, I think our area here in the Treasure Valley has come a long way too, but it wasn't always such a widely accepted and talked about topic.
Yeah. And I think even now it's not super accepted, but it is becoming much more, talked about. And, I say that our biggest epidemic is not, whatever COVID, it's silence. Like people not talking about things that really so many are experiencing. But really the kicker for me is that I had never had suicidal ideation. And I started having suicidal thoughts. And that was scary.
Did you talk about that to anybody?
I did. I talked about it first to a friend. And I remember saying, that's not unique. That's not unique. And I was.
What did you mean by that?
Right. She just, I think she was trying to give me comfort that
Oh, she was telling you it's not unique.
Right. Yeah,
oh, interesting.
I think she was trying to give me comfort and say hey,
that's normal. Everybody has those thoughts.
Right. But for me, it was unique. It was
not the normal.
This was not normal. And I've always, had a zest for life. I've always wanted to live life. And it scared me enough that when my husband suggested that, perhaps I had this bipolar disorder, and which I do want to eventually touch on when I first was diagnosed. So I went directly to a psychiatrist. At the time, there was a lot of unrest in our relationship, which also was very
causing some
So we had started fighting. So we went and saw a marriage counselor. And at first, I was resistant to no, I don't have that. And then he brought it up in front of the counselor, and the counselor said, well, maybe you should
explore this farther.
Explore this. And our first stop was to a psychiatrist.
Interesting. And how far from when he first mentioned it and you feel this sense of, offense to where you were more accepting to where, okay, maybe I need to look a little bit farther into this?
It wasn't long. I think once the counselor had suggested it, and because I was, experiencing
you knew something was off.
Yeah. I just wanted a solution.
Sure.
And
you said, how long were you feeling it at this point? Things changing to where it got so bad that he said something and you started seeking help?
Well, it had been up and down for, probably a year, because I also had thought, not too long after Trevor was born, that I was having postpartum. So I had gone into a walk-in clinic. I had been given an antidepressant, which in hindsight, I've learned so much through this journey, but in hindsight, antidepressants for someone with a mood disorder can
make it worse.
More problems.
Right.
Yes. So there's a lot to my story. But, once he said, maybe it's this, it was a few weeks and we went into a psychiatrist. And then that day,
went through the process, asked the questions. You were totally open and transparent. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking.
Yes. And my husband was with me. That was,
so he was supportive through this.
He was supportive, and he has been
awesome.
an amazing support and rock through this whole journey. And, and at the time, like running was non-existent for me at that time. So I had that definitely impacted things.
You had got to this point where you're physically at the best place you've been, and suddenly it all just shifted.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's slowly, right? Probably over a couple of years, my activity level went down, like things, like the stress went up. And so, she said bipolar. She gave me that diagnosis. And that was a life-shattering moment for me. Ooh, that makes me feel a little bit emotional to say that. I've talked about it a lot, but,
to hear the words and have them, looking at you and saying, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm diagnosing.
Yeah, because, before that, I felt like this sense of success for myself. Like I've got this amazing family. I've got 2 kids. I've had a great career. So it felt very shameful. It felt, I remember not so long after I was diagnosed, I had a dream board, and I remember ripping up my dream board. Like, I can't have my dreams anymore.
Everything changes.
Yeah, because I have this thing, and it went from bad to worse before things started getting better.
How so?
With bipolar disorder, you can be on several medications at one time. You got antidepressants bringing you up. You got mood stabilizers keeping you between 2 points. You got antipsychotics making sure you don't go too high. And so I would love it to be that, if you are doing the medication journey, that you're able to walk in and get
first attempt, it works.
Like, here's your pill, and now things are great. But that's not the case. In fact, I tried so many different kinds, so many different combinations. It was so difficult. And for a good 7-8 months, my mood continued to decline, go down further and further. And when I was maybe having a little suicidal thought here or there, it became full on, like attack. It became darkness, numbness. And I had a lot of also outside perspectives. My family members.
I was going to ask you, outside of your husband, what your family's seeing, if they're interacting with you and giving you feedback.
Yeah, I have an amazing family, and I had family members that did not agree with the diagnosis. That said, this medication is making it worse, not better. My sister one time said, Kylee, there's no more light in your eyes. And then she was right. There was no light. There was no joy. There was nothing in my eyes.
But they don't know what the struggle is inside and what you're trying to work through.
Yeah, I mean, they did, and there's a lot to that story too. But I would say my sister was right. Like, the medication for me, I'll never be anti-meds for people. And I did do the medication journey for many years.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, but at the time, it definitely made it worse. And to the point that I started, because I did have all these outside people saying, hey, this isn't right for you. And it was hard because I also had medical professionals telling me that if I did not do this medication
and stay consistent,
then my life would never be stable, that I would never, be Kylee again.
Yeah.
And I even had my doctor one time, which she is incredible. I would still, when someone is looking for a psychiatrist, I will recommend her. But I just wish I knew what I know now.
Sure.
One time she told me, when I was still very numb, I was functioning and I was able to take care of my kids, but I wasn't myself. I was still lower than where Kylee normally is. And she said, maybe this is your new norm. And I am so glad that I did not accept that. This cannot be my life. I deserve to have an amazing life. And so I didn't accept that this is my new norm. Like, I continued to find solutions, try things.
What are you doing at this point to find those solutions? Are you researching? Is it just through your own personal trial and error?
It is trial and error. And, everyone has the answer, right? Of what's going to fix it.
Yeah. I always, when somebody, brings that up, my comparison for that is the best parents are people with no kids.
Right.
Because they think they know it all.
Yes. And like, this oil
this is all you have to do.
And this, you need to do this. And it's going to, but truly, there are no easy solutions.
And everybody's journey is different.
Yeah. And you've got to continue trying different things and see what works for you. And I mean, and even like when you're in the depths of depression and someone says like, well, you need to exercise every day.
Just go and do this. It's hard to describe what that weight feels like. You're a smart person and you can rationalize it in your mind. And it's almost like, I should be able to think my way through this and push through. And it's hard to explain to people what that debilitating feeling is like.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it's been a slow process for me to figure out what is going to work for me. And, when everyone started speaking in, and eventually I started questioning like different medications, and I ended up switching doctors. And really that turned into a rough thing because I ended up also trying a new antidepressant. And at the time, we were in the midst of switching over my mood stabilizer to a different one. And so I wasn't on a medical range dosage of that. And so I tried this new antidepressant that this new doctor gave me. And
then you have to build into the dosage. And
then we ended up increasing the antidepressant dosage, but we didn't increase the mood stabilizer. And within 3 days, my mood shot through the roof, and I had my first full-blown manic episode.
Oh, geez.
Experienced mania to where I ended up being hospitalized involuntarily. They took me to the emergency room, and I was a danger to myself and others. And so
What are you thinking at this point?
Oh, I was thinking a lot of stuff.
I can only imagine, because when you're high in the mania, I mean, your mind is going like 1,000 miles an hour, and you can't keep up with it. But
it becomes too hot to like it ramps up, and I say that like mania. My kids were they were smaller at the time. We called it fire brain, and it's so much to describe because there's truth in it.
Right.
And then there's also confusion, and it becomes at the height of mania just so intense and so overwhelming that exhausting that you just want it to be over. And I believe in God, and I believe in those moments. He helped me through those moments, and yeah.
Was faith always a big part of your life, or did it come in more when you were going through this experience?
Interestingly enough, I've always had church and faith and a belief in Jesus, but I've never felt closer to God than when
you're going through that.
And my medical professionals are going to tell me that's hyper spiritual. You're hyper spiritual, and I'm like, well.
Whatever it was,
I've never felt so close to God. And still to this day, I do think it's actually improved my relationship with God. So, and yeah.
That's interesting. My journey somewhat echoes some of what you experienced when I first was diagnosed. I hit that same point where I was at the constant low that you referenced. It was a numbness to where I didn't even have that high and joy of any kind of excitement. It's hard to process all that. It adds to the weight of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it feels hopeless because especially the first couple times that you're going through, I think, because I say the darkness lies to you and tells you that this is your new normal, that it's not temporary. And I remember clearly the first time when I was feeling so hopeless, my husband, I say that he held the hope for me. And I remember a conversation with him one time when, I was in the depths of the pit, and he said, "Kylee, I promise if we just keep trying, we're going to find something that will work." And, I didn't have any hope for that, but he held that hope, and he said it in such a meaningful, heartfelt way. And I talk to a lot of people that their loved ones are struggling, that it's so important for them to hear that from you, especially when they're dealing with suicidal ideation, that
having that support there, somebody
that this is temporary if we just keep trying.
That supports you in continuing to push through. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. My wife, it was the catalyst for me wanting to make that change and really focus in even more on trying to work through that journey, not just for myself now, but for the benefit of the people around me that you love, that deserve you at your best. Yeah. So at what point, as you're going through this, when does it start to shift and you start finding yourself kind of on an upward trajectory?
Oh my goodness. I think when, oddly enough, I've started finding solutions of more natural medicine, more holistic medicine.
Like what?
Well, I'd say the biggest one that shifted me from medication would be purpose-driven chiropractic.
Okay.
Oddly enough. But what was great is hearing people say that you can manage mood without pharmaceutical medication. And I follow this lady named Pat Deegan, and she's the one that introduced me to the words mental health recovery. And, one of her YouTubes, she says, medication can help, but medication can also prevent recovery.
Yeah.
And in my case, it was preventing recovery. Yeah. We can go on a tangent of that. But I also think that the biggest thing that has led me to mental health recovery and feeling so much better and better than I have in years is movement.
Absolutely.
And it was really hard for me to start moving consistently. I had put on a ton of weight from many things, antidepressants, emotional eating, like all of the things. But I had heard somewhere that 20 minutes of movement
can change everything.
So I literally got a kindergarten sticker chart, and it was actually near COVID, right? I think right before COVID that I got a Peloton, and every day that I would either go for a walk or move for 20 minutes,
you got the sticker.
I would put a sticker on it.
There's something too, I think, a visual reminder. I ran a streak where I ran every day for a year, and to me, it's kind of that sticker idea. Once you see the consistency, you don't want to break it. And that becomes kind of a self-perpetuating cycle to keep you moving towards that goal of even one day at a time, 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And then it just starts to build. And over that longer period of time, you start to see the shift. I'm assuming that's kind of what happened for you as you start seeing the stickers stack up.
Yeah, absolutely. It gave me a sense of accomplishment, of success. And small goals going to bigger goals. I like to say I went from 20 minutes of movement to 20 miles. And really, I realized that I had this longing for running because I had really lost it along the way. And looking back, really, I believe that I didn't have mental health issues before this bipolar diagnosis due to running, due to movement and not as much stress in my life. And so I really, from Purpose Driven, the chiropractic place, it really opened my eyes to there are different kinds of stress in our lives, and we need to lower the stress. And whether it's chemical, physical, emotional, you need to work to lower it in all those areas. And the body can handle so much stress, but at some point, it can't. And then it starts showing up as either physical or mental, right?
Other manifestations.
It's gonna come out. I watched a movie called Heal. And it talks about that, about how much stress that the body can handle, and it's going to show up. And so I think just shortly after my first manic episode in hospitalization, which added so much shame to me. And
this isn't the life that you envisioned for yourself.
No, are you kidding me? Especially the hospitalization, I think was even worse than the diagnosis, that first hospitalization. Because the interesting thing about bipolar disorder, or for me, when I elevated to the point of mania, it's generally coupled with sleep, lack of sleep. I won't sleep for days. And I've learned that now. I have to have ample sleep. And if I don't, I'm taking measures to
How do you make sure you get that? Because that's something I still struggle with. If I get 4 or 5 hours, that's a good night's sleep. If it's uninterrupted, that's magic. It never happens. So how do you ensure that you get that sleep?
So I monitor it, and I took medication that would give me that sleep. And as I've worked off and added all these more healthier things in my body, I do sleep well. But when there's more stress, there's big events, there's, things happening, it
impacts that.
Yeah. And it is the one medication that I still take that's prescribed to me as needed, an antipsychotic. And so I will absolutely take that if I notice that my sleep is to the point of concern. If I don't get 6 hours of sleep, if it starts going less than that, but I still have surprising energy, then that is an indicator. That is a lesson that I've learned that can't go on, because bad things are going to happen. My mood is going to, the less sleep I get and the energy is still rising, then,
you need to pay attention to it. It might not happen in one day, but if it continues to build, it can turn into an issue.
Exactly.
So as you're going through this and you're starting to work your way towards healthy habits and you're starting to bring running back into your life, how does that transition into where you're at now, where you're an advocate? And I'd like to ask you about Greater. What is Greater? Explain what that is, how that came to be, and the components of that.
Yeah.
So first, let's start with what is Greater?
So I would say that Greater wasn't inspired out of running in the beginning. So it actually, I think I started it probably pretty elevated. And it was right after that first hospitalization. I started to tell you that story. I woke up, they gave me a shot in the butt with, some sleep juice in the ER. And then once I sleep, I become coherent. I come back to myself. And so at 4 p.m., around 4 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, I woke up in a mental health facility. And I jokingly called it bipolar jail. I like to make light of things sometimes, but really it was it was probably the hardest experience of my life to wake up in that mental health facility. I woke up to some dude going "Are you okay? You've been sleeping all day." And I'm
oh my gosh,
dude, they gave me a shot in the butt. And you're in this place and they've stripped you of not only your shoelaces and anything that could be risked.
Potentially used as a self-harm weapon or...
Yeah, you're stripped of your dignity. And it was also very scary because I didn't know how long I had to stay there. I couldn't leave. And I didn't know if my husband was saying, hey, she can't come home. And it was very scary.
You're just there stuck in your head.
Yeah. And the problem with that is that I was coherent. I was very lucid. And so it was, when am I going to get out of here? Thankfully, the social worker, or I think they call it the designated examiner, they have 72 hours to come in and evaluate you and decide if you are staying or going. And that person let me out immediately, said, okay, she's okay to go home. And right thereafter, my brother at the time had lived in Oregon. He's driving over. My family is very alarmed because this is a very surprising turn of events. When the doctor had said, we don't want you spinning out and ending up at the hospital, in my mind, that was where babies were born. It never crossed my mind. I had no knowledge of mental health facility, and it is a very different experience at a mental health facility versus the hospital, and damaging and harmful. And even though I needed to be there, it was very hard. And so we called a family meeting right thereafter, and my brother was there and my sister and a couple other family members. And I remember that everyone got to go around the room and say their piece of how they were feeling about the situation.
So it's a full-on intervention.
Oh, yeah. Just how did we end up here? And, we had some people that are like, it is because of this medication that this is happening. And, I was raised by a single mom, and my older brother had played the father figure in my life. Just the salt of the earth kind of a guy. And he was sitting next to me, and he just turned to me and he said, Kylee, I just don't want you to have shame in this. That was a pivotal moment. And I'm getting to the answer of your question of where greater came from, because that
was a turning point.
It was a turning point. And I certainly didn't immediately shove off the shame. This was not common knowledge that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
And you've got kids?
Yeah, I've got kids, and I was not public at the time, but I just had this desire. So by December, I had started Greater because I finally realized that, I don't have to have shame in this. And I want to help other people not have shame in it too.
And we'll get to what it's developed into today, but how did it start when you came up with the concept for Greater? What was it?
I remember I didn't have an idea what it was going to be. I was just going to help people. So I didn't go, oh, we're going to do this project, and this project.
So what did you do? Did you start a website, or did you just start doing outreach? Greater comes to mind, and what are you doing with it?
Well, the very beginning, I just went through the steps of, I'm going to set up a nonprofit. We're going to have a fundraising event to get us started. So we had the Greater Gala that first year, and then we're going to figure out how to help people. And so very shortly thereafter, we began the Greater Sock Project. I began talking about my mental health. I shared on Facebook that I had this diagnosis.
Was that part of your recovery, or is that something that you were already well on your way to a better place and you thought, I want to be helpful to other people, and so I'm going to just share what I went through?
I didn't know the words recovery until 8 years into my diagnosis. And that has become a part of Greater, the words mental health recovery. But I didn't know them at the time. So I just want to help people. That's just who I am. I'm a helper. I just want to help people. And so I didn't realize the power that sharing my story and being open about it, how healing that would be to my mental health. And I'm not encouraging everyone to immediately get a diagnosis and go out and share on social media.
Again, everybody's journey and experience with these things is different.
Yeah, I think you have to be ready to share openly, but even just talking to people and not having it be this shameful thing. And as soon as I started sharing, oh my goodness, the floodgates opened of people coming to me, people messaging me,
Which I think helps you work through it. And one of the things that you've touched on a few times that I would guess was instrumental to your ability to work through this is you had support. You had people there to encourage you and make sure that if you fell, you didn't fall far and kept yourself moving forward.
Yeah, I did. I actually called it my bipolar task force. Find those people that you trust that can help you through this journey, people you can talk to. I am very blessed by my family and my friends that have gathered around me, and professional providers. I'm very blessed by the support, even the providers that help me through this journey. Not everyone has that.
Right.
And so that's hard.
So when does it start to transition into what it's become? Because part of Greater now, as I went through your website and I was looking at it, you have Top of Tamarack, which we could touch on that, Trail Fridays. When did running start to come back around?
A few years ago, I missed running so much.
Are you doing any other kinds of exercises? Do you hit the gym, or do you ride bikes, or do you ski, or is running, that's your thing?
Well, I do like strength training now. Mm-hmm. And back when I originally was running, I would always do, it's like pre-bipolar. I did a boot camp every week and we ski. But during this 7-year gap of not moving consistently, I wasn't doing a lot. Not at all. I wasn't doing a lot. I missed the joy that I experienced from running and doing races. I missed it, but I just didn't have that motivation.
It was still in there. You just weren't sure how to pull it back out.
Yeah, I kept trying different things to get it back. And now I can see things that have helped me get it back. But I had the hardest time because my mood was so low. I lacked motivation to get out there and do it. And so, a few years ago, I finally just got to the point that it's like, I just want that back. I want that racing. I want that running feeling.
The camaraderie, the community.
Yes, yes. And part of it is that the people that I used to run with and do races with, they're just not doing it anymore. And they don't have these ultra aspirations that I now do. And so I didn't have that community. Top of Tamarack, it came about before Trail Fridays did.
And what is Top of Tamarack?
So Top of Tamarack is a mental health and suicide prevention event at Tamarack Resort the last Saturday in September every year. So this will be our 5th year.
Oh, wow.
And it's funny because it seems like all these things just start out a little bit organically. But at the time, before running, I had started mountain biking and I was just doing it here and there. This was, over the 7-year gap. And a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, her name is Maria, and she lives at Tamarack in Donley. And she's the one who taught me to mountain bike. And when I would go up there, we would go on these little mountain biking adventures. But one time she sent me a photo of her and another person that I know, another friend up there, and they had just ridden to the summit, from the base to the summit, 3,000 feet. They had ridden their mountain bikes. And while I was really happy for her, I had this sense of sadness and FOMO of she didn't invite me.
Oh.
And she didn't invite me because I couldn't have done it. And, because I wasn't consistently moving, I wasn't active enough. That is a really hard ride. And I was missing out. And that was a turning point for me of like, I'm so tired of missing out on all these adventures because I'm not moving, because I'm depressed. And so I made kind of this interval of next year, I'm going to ride to the summit. I'm going to do that with her.
On the top of Tamarack.
Yeah. And so I love hosting like little events, or like we'd do like a turkey trot for our family and I'd make sweatshirts for everyone or things like that. And before that, her and I had explored with, Tamarack management. We just didn't talk to the right people at the time, but we had explored doing like a fun run, a suicide prevention event. And it just didn't happen for various reasons. We weren't able to go forth with it. We didn't have the funds needed to do it. And so that idea had kind of died. And so we were kind of planning out this next, like I started riding regularly and started talking to Berea about it. And we're like, well, let's just invite our friends and family and we'll get sweatshirts made. We'll make shirts and start from her place and ride up the mountain. And then I happened to design the thing saying Top of Tamarack, the logo. And I posted on Facebook just to get, hey, friends, like, what do you think of this? Get
some feedback.
Get some feedback.
Yeah.
And it happened, the right person saw it and said that she was actually an accountant for the Homeowners Association. And she said, hey, have you talked to the homeowner manager? His name's Levi. Have you talked to Levi about this? Like, this would be a really cool homeowners event. And and so then we went and talked to him. And at the time, Greater was still on my heart. And I said, we could make this suicide prevention event. And unfortunately, at the time, there had been a teen up there. His name was Jordan Goodwin, and he completed suicide that summer. So we said, hey, what if we do the event in his name? Yeah, his family member was on the board at the time. And so we said, any proceeds we'll donate to a memorial fund for him. And that was the birth of Top of Tamarack. Levi got on board with TMA and said, yes, let's make this a homeowners event. And so we did it. It was during COVID. So I didn't even know if it was going to happen. And I had ridden that summer and I was planning to ride to the summit. I got COVID a couple weeks before. I had walking pneumonia. So like, it's amazing that event even went off. Luckily, I had Berea helping me get it going.
It was a riding event at that point?
It was hike, bike, or run. So you could do either. So
is it still?
It is.
Okay.
It is still, yeah. So I didn't end up riding to the summit that summer, but I was able physically to go to mile 1. And the way that we set the event up is we want to encourage anyone to get out there and to set a goal. And whether you're ready the year before, I wasn't ready to ride to the summit or hike to the summit or run to the summit. So what we did is we made these little tokens. And on one side, it says top of Tamarack. And on the other side, it says mentally strong. And each mile has a little bucket of tokens. And so you can go up and collect. We say there's no DNF. There's no did not finish. Go set a goal for yourself. Hey, I physically can make it to mile 1.
Point.
Yeah. Or I can make it to mid-mountain, and then you come back down and then you celebrate. And the idea behind that is that, okay, well, this year I'm going to make it to mile 1. And then you come back next year. Hey, I'm going to make it to mile 2.
I love that.
And so it's like that process. Like when I first started running of like, hey, maybe I'm not ready to go all the way to the summit. That's okay.
Yeah.
But I can make it to 1,
It's like you said, break it down into a SMART goal.
Yeah. Break it down. So
we're in the 5th year, coming into the 5th year now of Top of Tamarack?
Yes. So that first year, there was a lot of people that came and saw, us doing something, the homeowners doing something down there. And so we had 50 homeowners that did it that year.
Okay.
And they were like, well, we would be interested in doing this. And so then we started talking to TMA and saying, hey, could this be a public event?
How did you figure out how to put it all together?
Trial and error, I guess.
You just get on Google and how to put together an event?
I mean, I've been to a lot of races, and we now have a race committee that helps put it all on. And just figuring out, like I was doing a race a month. I had been to so many races. So
I got this. I can figure it out.
And like there's certain things that are important to me. There's a lot of little meaningful things that we do at Top of Tamarack, and swag is important to me. Like I want cool swag, and there's just a lot of little details that
mean a lot.
Yeah. And the big thing now, we started the Memorial Mile, and that's where any participant, volunteer, sponsor can recommend an honoree, someone who's lost their life to suicide or mental health struggles. This last year, I think we had about 160 honorees, people who died by suicide, and it's just on this most beautiful part of the course. It's very symbolic because not only do we have a Memorial Mile where you can honor a loved one that's been lost, we have the Overcomer Alley, which is up towards the summit of the course. And that part is very rugged and rocky. And so you can nominate yourself that like, hey, I am committed to stepping toward the life I desire. Because I feel like you
have to struggle a little bit.
Yeah. Well, in the first year we just had the Memorial Mile, it was technically our second year, but we had the Memorial Mile. And then I just felt like we should also be celebrating those that are still here.
Absolutely.
So we had probably 70 people that either put themselves or a loved one on the Overcomer Alley. But like I was saying, the Memorial Mile, it's just this beautiful, and it's indescribable how powerful it is to go along that.
That's what I was just thinking as you're explaining, and I can only imagine what it feels like to actually be there in that energy and sense of oneness with that many people and that much emotion and feeling. I'm sure it's indescribable.
It is. The first year, I actually got to do the entire course, and I hike/ran it. And I was coming up to the Memorial Mile, and I saw my aunt's plaque. Her name was Marlene. And I had started, I was still doing stuff at the base while everyone went off. So I started behind everyone. And so I came up, and it was just so quiet and beautiful. And, it made me emotional. And I turned to go, and there was this lady coming down. Her name is Patty. Party Patty, and she grabbed me in her arms and gave me the biggest hug. And it was such a beautiful moment of remembering my aunt. And I think that it's a really healing part of the course for people. We now have flowers that have been donated, and you can put your flowers along people's mile marker. And
that's one of those moments where you just, you're at the right place at the right time and you're doing the right thing.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, the event, like the feedback that we get from the event, and, people leave pictures. There was someone drank a beer with their loved one, which I loved. And it feels good after the event is over to see how impactful it is for people, and that people are they're bringing their whole family. People are coming back,
It sounds like it's at the end, it's a celebration. And to me, that's a better way to honor somebody's memory than to just, I don't want to say wallow in the sadness, because there's a sadness in it that I think you have to experience and feel. I think that's an important part of the process. But I love this celebration aspect of all these people coming together to have this remembrance and doing something hard and fulfilling.
Yeah.
That's such a rewarding opportunity, it sounds like.
Well, and the interesting thing is, or the unique part of it is, that suicide's a very taboo subject. And so a lot of these people, there's shame that comes with that alone. And so it gives people the opportunity to celebrate their loved one, when otherwise it's like, even in schools, they don't want you putting a bench out with someone's name on it, because it might encourage more. And
you're providing a safe space.
Safe space.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I love this, and I do want to tie it all together just to where people can find more information about all these. But where did Trail Fridays come into the picture? And can you explain what Trail Fridays is?
Yeah, Trail Fridays is amazing. So it has been such a saving grace for me, especially personally over the last year and a half, when my life kind of got a little bit harder.
And you partner with mutual friend of the podcast, somebody that's absolutely amazing that we're discussing, Alex Mimlitz and Megan Lacey with Fleet Feet.
Yes, absolutely. There would be no Trail Fridays if it weren't for Fleet Feet and Alex and Megan. In fact, so one of the ways that I got back to running and racing is that before Alex owned Fleet Feet, he was coaching. And I was at the point where I was struggling with consistency. And so when I'm struggling with something, I look for solutions. And one thing I thought is, I need a coach. And
sounds like an accountability partner.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I wish that like Miles could be that for me, but but he could write me a training plan, but I'm not accountable to him.
Yeah.
Like, I need an outside, or
Stop
even
telling me what to do.
Yeah. Well, or not even that, just like, if we're like, we're going to get up at 6 a.m. and go for a run, one of us is going to go, no, too tired.
Yeah.
And so I put a post out in one of the running groups, does anyone know any coaches? And I had actually met Alex when he worked at Fleet Feet before, and someone had tagged him. And so I met with him, and he's just an incredible human. And so we decided that I was going to coach with him. But he was talking about his process and, writing the plans. And I was like, no, I need you to run with me at least one day a week, because at the time I didn't have anyone to run with. It seemed like the people that I kept asking to run, because I lacked that inner motivation to get out and go. And so I would try to plan things with friends that I used to run with, and inevitably they would end up canceling. And then I would cancel too, because I you
don't have to meet somebody, so it's easier to say no.
Yeah. So then I just still couldn't get out. And so I was like, I will pay you to run with me.
You're not just coaching with me. You're now my run buddy.
You're now my running friend. I will pay you to do that, because I am that desperate. And I needed that. And so we would run once a week. And of course, he's so fast, but he was so great. He was such a great coach. I'm so sad he's so busy with Fleet Feet, because he's an incredible coach. And during that time, when you're out on the trails, you just have amazing conversations. And I had expressed to him how lonely I was in my running. Just the people that I used to do it with, they're not around anymore. And lo and behold, a little bit later, he asked me, after top of Tamarack, he had purchased Fleet Feet, or started running Fleet Feet. And he asked if I would lead a Winter Warriors, their program, be one of the leaders for that. And I agreed to do that, which was incredible, because still at the time, winter has always been very hard for me. And so I wasn't getting out, but I did get out to lead those runs. And so after the end of that season in February, I had met a couple people, and I had said, I'm still wanting to run on. Yeah, let's run on Fridays. Alex caught wind of that and said, well, hey, if you're still going to be out there, would you continue
put together
leading?
A program of some sort?
And so then it became this beautiful, organic thing that one of the girls had a graphic design background, so she made a logo for us, and I recruited some leaders, and we started leading, and eventually we went along. And Fleet Feet does this really cool thing. They're partnered with us to where when you come a certain amount of times, you earn free swag. And so if you come 10 times with us, you'll get a goodie bag with a gator and a magnet. If you come 25, you get a pair of really cool socks.
That's awesome.
Fleet Feet and Trail Fridays on it, and a BOCO hat at 50. So it's like what other group actually pays you to show
get
up?
out and do it.
Yeah.
Well, those little tokens go a long way. It's having some sort of a goal, even if it's just, I'm doing this to get the gator or whatever. Once you start building the consistency, that's where the magic happens.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And as time went on, I really started thinking about just this informal thing that I was volunteering, doing on the side. Well, it helped my mental health so much. I started this community and I suddenly had these people that were...
your accountability partners.
Yes.
They're expecting that you're going to be there now every Friday.
Yes.
Which is going to get them out of, whatever time you're doing it, out of bed, moving there.
Yes. One hard thing about coming back to running is that, again, I'm slower and I haven't been running. There's a lot of hiking. I use the word run very loosely. There's a lot of hiking in my running, but I tried to go to other running groups and there was this pressure of I'm not fast enough.
Performance.
Or they would do like a regroup. I'm trying to think like no man left behind, right? So we're going to run and then we'll stop and wait for you at the top of the hill. That is a lot of pressure for a slower runner or for someone just coming back.
Everybody's caught their breath, and as you're getting there, they're taking off again.
Yeah.
I just got here.
And also embarrassing, right? Oh, they're all waiting for me. And so as we're developing Trail Fridays, we have our tagline, or not tagline, but we would say we start together, but we don't necessarily stay or finish together.
Okay.
Because everyone just goes their own pace because we really want to have this inclusive environment that whether you're there to hike the whole time or you are a mountain goat and you just love to run up the hills or a combination of both, everyone is welcome. There's a lot of groups that say all pace is welcome, but for us slower runners, it's really intimidating. Yeah. And so our little tagline is somewhere to belong. And really, that's what the group started feeling like for me, was just this place where I knew people. And now I go to races. And now when I need someone to run with, I can text them and say, hey, the group is great because you meet other people. And then you have all these running buddies.
And I love that you're talking about this, that it removes the pressure of, again, performance of I have to run this pace or keep up with all these people. It's still getting everybody out there to start together. So you're still building that community and having that sense of inclusion.
Yes.
But everybody can then go and enjoy it however they choose to.
Yeah.
If they want to stop and take pictures or take their time, or if they just want to go gung-ho.
Yes.
That's awesome.
We always do a long route and a shorter route because a lot of us have these ambitions of trail races and ultra running. And, but there's also people that are hiking Machu Picchu and gearing up for that, or just out there to get their movement in. And so we want to embrace all of that. There's a trade-off. Like there is some self-navigation required. We actually put the routes and usually in footpath or all trails and say, here's the route we're doing. Certainly you can do a choose your own adventure, but we give options, and we have like a thing that we do every time when we meet called a whiffle, what I feel like expressing. And so we go around, and that's our opportunity to just have a little bit of time together. Yeah. But really what I realized as we were going along, that what we offer is movement, obviously, and community connection is powerful for mental health. Movement,
huge.
Powerful for mental health. And purpose, the goal setting, we encourage people to set goals, and then you got nature on top of that. Like this is like the powerhouse of mental health. And it just started occurring to me. We got to the point where it was costing me personally money, it was costing leaders money, if we needed this or that. And
things aren't free.
Yeah, things aren't free. And we need an organization, and what does that look like? And then it just made sense. Like, this is powerful for mental health. This has helped my mental health so much.
It was a natural alignment with greater.
It really was.
That's
awesome. So it's like we've got Fleet Feet as our sponsoring partner. They are intimately involved in everything we do, and we love them. And
isn't it interesting how all these things just kind of serendipitously have come together at the right time just to create something that really seems so integral to your own mental health and your own consistency and moving forward in recovery. And what it does to touch so many other people.
Yeah, I don't think the timing is an accident.
Absolutely.
It was incredible. In fact, this Trail Fridays itself was not a new concept. Like, I had started my own back in the pre-bipolar running days.
Yeah.
We had a little group that I had started called Trail Fridays, and we eventually changed it to Trail Junkies. And it was the same concept. I adopted the same concept, but it didn't grow into what it is organically now. So it's kind of like, I feel like it was God's timing of now is the time for Trail Fridays.
Right. See, and that's the thing, is I think there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of people that are doing their own little running groups there, but I think there's some right now that are really bubbling to the surface because I think there's a transparency and what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, you have to put it out there. You have to share it. You have to talk about it, whether it's utilizing social media to promote it. That's what I'm looking for. There has to be some promotion behind it to make sure that people are aware and they know that these things are out there.
Yes.
And it seems like that's what you're doing. Tree City Track Club is starting to really grow and do a lot with that as well.
Well,
And Alex and Megan and Fleet Feet seem to be really coming along and supporting that a ton.
I would give so much credit to Trail Fridays for Fleet Feet support in that. You know, people come into the store, they're looking for a place to belong. And so definitely have to give huge credit to Alex and Megan for supporting our club. And then we have leaders volunteering their time that care about it. But we put on some really cool stuff. But man, for me, especially the last year and a half after my son was diagnosed with leukemia.
How do you balance that? You have this diagnosis that you find out about with your son, and you're trying to work through your own mental health issues and trying to find a consistency there, and then you get this put in front of you.
Yeah, you know, I really think that every hard thing that I went through with my mental health was
preparing you for that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that these last few minutes as you were explaining these other things. That's all I kept thinking is everything that you went through was preparing you.
Yes, absolutely. Everything that I went through was preparing me. Like, you know, I found mental health recovery.
Supporting community.
I learned so much. I began moving again. And all of that happened. And like in Trail Fridays, we say we're all climbing mountains. We're all climbing mountains. And whether they're literal ones or figurative ones, and this was my new mountain. It was about a year and a half ago that my son started having some weird swollen lymph nodes. And it was several weeks of more and more and no other symptoms. And then we got the diagnosis, and that was really hard. And I got to say, we went to the hospital. It was a Thursday night. And a couple hours before, they had finally done a CT, and he had had all these bumps and nothing was coming back on the blood work showing cancer. And they finally did a CT, and they were going to biopsy one of the lymph nodes. And the CT showed that his airways were getting closed up because of the swelling. And so they immediately took us into the hospital, and they did a third blood test. And the doctor called. It was pretty late at night, and she says, "We don't need to do the biopsy. I know what this is. This is leukemia." And I don't even know how I did it, but the next morning at St. Luke's downtown, I just decided to go to Trail Friday. Someone else was, I sent a message, someone else is going to have to lead, but I got myself over to Trail Fridays, and there were probably 6 ladies there, and we did our wiffle. And
exactly what you needed at the moment.
Yeah, and they all just embraced me and hugged me and cried with me, and then we ran, and I needed that trail therapy. I needed that release. And they picked up the reins, and they held down the fort while we were in the hospital for that first month. And even since then, I know that I have to run. I have to move because it's
therapy.
Yeah. And it became 10 times more important. Like, I know that I can't stop. Yeah. Like, that is keeping me well so that I can then keep my son well.
And the crazy thing is, to your point, you said everybody's climbing mountains.
Yeah.
Every one of those people is going through something that has that weight of the world.
Yes. And we see it over and over again in the group. And what's interesting is sometimes when we do our wiffle, people will share that, like, something hard that's going on. And we all are. We're all going through those hard things. And the key is to, instead of being a victim in that, finding the solutions, continuing to step forward, continuing to live your life.
And it goes back, I think, to surrounding yourself with community, which is such a key component of trying to have these conversations and interactions, is consistent healing and moving ourselves forward, knowing that we're not alone.
Yeah. And I think it's been really fulfilling that not only has it impacted me so much and helped me so much, but then to see the other people in this beautiful, growing community, seeing people connect and feel like they are a part of something. Whereas before they came to Trail Fridays, maybe they didn't have that.
Yeah.
And it's so important.
It goes back to that safe space. And now with everything that you've been through and you've experienced, and you're being open and authentic and transparent and sharing it, you're almost in a spot where you can kind of pull that out of them, that it's okay to let it out and not be stuck in your own head.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, we don't even have to dwell on this, but as you're explaining about going through this with your son, what that would have been like if it would have happened when you weren't in a better space.
Oh, no kidding. I think God was preparing me for this mountain.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for every hard thing that I went through. And funny enough is that first month in the hospital or so, there was eagle eyes on Kylee. Like, is Kylee gonna,
Are you going to roll off the cliff?
Yeah.
I can imagine.
But I didn't. I was in a survival mode. That was the end of August. 1 month later was top of Tamarack. And it allowed me to wave my white flag and say, I need help.
Yeah.
I need someone else to direct this. And it still went off and it was incredible. And Bryson was able to come to that. And
it's got to just make your heart swell knowing that you're surrounded by so much support and people that want to help these missions that you started, you organized, but now it's become bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
To where these other people, they understand and they want to help make sure that these things continue.
Yeah. The leaders in Trail Fridays, the volunteers at Greater, I'm so grateful for them, but it is important to them too. And that feels good that it's something that I started. Other people see the vision and care about it and want it to continue.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, it's got my head spinning on all these questions I want to ask. So the first thing I do want to touch on, though, is how do they learn more about Trail Fridays?
So they can go to our website, greater.org, and they're under what we do. There's a Trail Fridays link on there.
And greater.org, it's not spelled out.
It's GR8, the number 8, TER.org. Good question. And Trail Fridays is on Instagram, and we also have a group on Facebook, and we post all our meetups in the Fleet Feet Warriors Facebook page as well.
And I did see you're working towards some other resources through the Greater organization that I saw on the website that I think it was some mentors.
Peer support?
Peer support, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, peer support is something that's super important to me. And I, through this many-year journey of mine, I didn't realize that I was being a peer support to other people, right? Like it was a turning point in my early days when someone opened up to me about their experience with their mental health struggle. And because I started openly sharing, people then would come to me. And I didn't realize at the time that I was peer supporting them. Like I go and meet people for a coffee. I message people. Like I just want to help people. And around 8 years into my journey, which is both a frustration for me a little bit, a friend of mine posted on Facebook, not that I was frustrated at her, but she made this post that said that she had just done this certified peer support training. She has an incredible story of overcoming addiction. And so I texted her and said, hey, do they have this for mental health? And she's like, it is for mental health, really? And at the time, I had never heard of peer support or certified peer support. And so there's actually, you can become a certified peer support specialist. I actually went through the training, and the idea behind it is mental health recovery. Like it's a goal-based program. The only qualification you need is that you have lived experience with a mental health struggle and a year of stability. And then you can go through a program and then you can become a paid peer support specialist. The unfortunate part is that the only insurance that covers someone to have a peer support specialist is Medicaid. So anyone on Medicaid can go into a behavioral health agency and request a peer support specialist, someone to...
But if you have standard insurance.
No, there's no peer support there or no certified peer support. But the cool thing about a peer support specialist is that they come in with you once a week and you set goals. So it's this beautiful
accountability partner again.
Yes. And Greater's like friend. Even though I didn't know what Greater was in the beginning, I knew that I wanted to empower people. I wanted to empower people to step forward to the life that they want. So it's been this beautiful, as time goes on, development of what that looks like and helping people go from mental illness mindset to mental health recovery. And it was in that peer support training that I did, it's a week-long training, and I wanted to understand what it was. And so that was when, for the first time after being diagnosed, I heard the words mental health recovery. I was like, say what? Like mental health recovery, what is that?
Yeah, what are you talking about? Once I have it, I've got it for life.
Right. That is hope in 3 words right there. Why did I not have, and when I was diagnosed, this life-shattering, shame-filled diagnosis? why didn't they tell me at that time? Oh, but guess what? No problem, because there's mental health recovery. You can still live an amazing life.
Yeah.
And so that has become, my personal mission, or my mission with Greater, is that I want everyone to know those words, mental health recovery, and have that hope that, hey, it's okay. That diagnosis is just information. I got to change some things, or something's going on. And if I continue stepping forward and trying new things and setting goals for myself, I can have mental health recovery.
I love that.
So, yeah.
And all of this can be found on your website at greater.org.
Oh, yeah. So that was the question, is the peer support. So in my heart, I know that peer support is so powerful, and I want us to have, I have big visions of a program where you could come and there would be peer support groups of all different kinds. And maybe there's an after-school program for teens to come and hang out. And those are future goals of ourselves. And for now, people reach out, people message, and we provide that one-on-one peer support. But we are working towards a program that's awesome, that would enable that.
Well, the things you're doing it's absolutely amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's empowering, I think, to those that, again, going back to the recovery side of things, it's not something you talk about a lot with mental health. And it's awesome to see the person sitting in front of me now, that everything that you've gone through, that you're not only doing it for yourself, now you're doing it for a greater good. And it's continuing to build and compound as you bring in more people and they're empowered to become leaders and support and encourage the growth of this. And that's awesome to see. Yeah, I hope it just keeps continuing to grow.
I specifically like that you said the greater good.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I want to ask you a few more questions here. We've been going for a little bit. And one of them is, for where you're at now and the experiences that you have, what is the advice that, if you could, you would give your 18-year-old self?
My 18-year-old self or my 32-year-old self?
I'll let you choose.
I have too much advice to give to my 32-year-old self.
If you had a 30-second elevator pitch.
Yeah. I would say to Kylee that it's going to be okay. And just continue stepping forward to the life you want.
It's always out there.
It's always out there. Yeah. The difficult thing is that I have learned so much, and I'm so excited to be able to share that to help others, because it is frustrating to me that there was such a long span, and I think it was right and everything happened and it needed to happen so then I can be someone that can share,
advocate.
But I would just want people to know that a diagnosis, a mental health struggle, it's not the end. And there is so much you can do. There's so much hope. There's so much possibility, and that you can still live the life that you want.
And it doesn't have to define you.
It doesn't have to define you. It is just information. And I think that the people that struggle the most are the ones that stay stuck and they don't try things, and they don't have hope that there can be still the life that they want. But it takes movement from them.
I think it goes back to it takes a village. It's hard to do these things on your own. And it seems like what you're doing through Greater, you're putting together all these resources. And I don't want to call it a one-stop shop, but it's an easy, centralized location to connect people, build these resources, and share awareness and knowledge to those that need it.
Yeah. I'd like to we'll keep doing our thing, and hopefully help as many people as we can. But I think the biggest thing to know is just that, when you have a diagnosis or when you have a mental health struggle, just like me, I was in my early 30s and I never struggled with it before. And you don't know what you don't know. And there is so much out there. There's so many resources. There's so many things that you can do. And
again, you don't know what you don't know, and it can hit at different points. Like you said, yours came on a little bit later.
Yeah.
Some people might have had it and started struggling earlier in life. I think you also have to be willing to help yourself.
Yes, 1,000%. Yeah. But I get so many people, especially parents. That's the hardest one. I definitely have it on my heart to help parents and kids in school. That's what actually Top of Tamarack proceeds are going towards, is helping suicide prevention and mental health in Idaho schools.
Nice.
So, yeah.
There's a greater purpose there.
There's a greater purpose.
Greater purpose.
That's right.
So this next question, it doesn't have to necessarily tie to mental health. But it can be anything. If it does, that's fine. But what's the one message that you think the world at large needs to hear right now?
I think, like I said before, that silence is our biggest epidemic. And so I think that we need to talk about things. I think we need to be open with mental health and be willing to share and to accept that this is a problem that a lot of people have. And so I would say just talking about it.
Everybody's unique, but at the same time, kind of to your point, it's not a unique situation that you're not the only one that's suffering from this. And sure, it's a little bit different for each and every person, but you're not alone if you're willing to put yourself out there to find the people to align with that can help you move in a positive direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a closer question. And if you've listened to any of the podcast, I think you probably know what's coming, but I'm really curious what your answer to it would be. Is what does legacy mean to you? And what's the legacy that you want to be remembered for?
Okay, I've thought a lot about this one. So when people ask my husband what my best quality is, I'll borrow his answer. Like what I do, what I tend to do is I take something that's been really hard for me, whether it's just starting running or, navigating a cancer journey or getting back to running in general, going through a mental health facility and getting ugly socks, whatever those hard things are. I go through them and then I try to make it easier for other people. So if that's what I'm remembered for, that would make me pretty happy that, I took hard things and then I helped other people make them not quite so hard.
I love that. And the thing that I'm taking away from our conversation is I mentioned this earlier, but I love that you're doing something that's bigger than yourself. You're taking everything that you've been through and you're turning it into this thing where you can step away from it and you have these other leaders and these other people that are willing to continue to push this forward and make sure that all these other unique, amazing individuals have the support in the community that they need to continue on their journeys as well. And I said that was my closer question, but I'm going to ask you one more.
Okay.
What's the Sock Project?
Oh, okay. So the Greater Sock Project, it was probably the first real big project that is still continuing to this day. So I started to talk about this. I was having a conversation with someone else diagnosed with bipolar disorder, also had stayed in a mental health facility. And we were just talking about how horrible the socks are. And just you get in there, they strip you of your dignity and they give you really crappy socks. And so if anyone, has stayed in a mental health facility, you'll know what I'm talking about. And her and I were just talking back and forth and brainstorming, like we're sharing our experiences and just how hard they were. And, gifts is my love language. And so we were just talking about how wonderful it would be to just receive a little gift when you are experiencing the hardest day of your life. And, I give her credit because she's the one who came up with the sock idea. Her name's Mary Coulter, and she's pretty incredible. And it rolled from there. We get donors, Bombas. It gives us these amazing socks. And, someday I have this big aspiration because the socks that they give are black. And, I love to have colorful socks. Yeah. But what we do is we take socks and little items like chapsticks and soaps. And we've done a lot of different things. And we put them in some sort of beautiful little package. And really probably the most important part is the card that comes with it. And it just says, hey, we've been where you are and you're not alone. And what we found is taking little steps forward. And I wish I knew it verbatim, but it basically just says, we'd love to give you these socks and you're not alone. Get just a small message of hope. And so what we do is we package them up and we'll actually be having a volunteer event coming up soon. And then we deliver those to mental health facilities, addiction treatment centers, homeless shelters. And I have an amazing director of that project that is just incredible. And it's been happening for many years now.
That's awesome. So many amazing things that you're doing. Thank you for taking the time to come and share a little bit. It really is amazing what you've done and the story that is your life that you've gone through to be where you're at now and having the impact that you are. It's absolutely inspirational. And thank you so much for taking the time and being so open and transparent with me. I appreciate that.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and for you to help us.
Absolutely.
Help us runners spread our messages.
Absolutely. So people can find more at greater.org, the number 8, TER.org.
Correct.
And if they want to connect with you, learn more about you, where can they do that?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram under Kylee Wiscombe, and I love connecting with people. So you can find me at either of those places.
Awesome. Well, if you are struggling out there listening to this and you need resources, please reach out to somebody. Go to greater.org and connect through Trail Fridays. Look for Top of Tamarack coming in September. And with that, we'll just say go forth and be awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And that wraps up another episode of the Run from the Norm podcast. Kylie's story is a perfect example of how resilience, movement, and community can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. From struggling to run a mile and battling through mental health challenges to creating an awesome community resource that you can learn more about at greater.org, she's proof that you don't have to let your struggles define you. Just keep moving and don't give up. Whether it's running, hiking, or just taking that first step towards something better, movement just has a way of pulling us through even the hardest moments. And as a side note, I finally launched the official Run from the Norm monthly newsletter. In it, you'll get a wrap-up of all kinds of yummy goodness like the latest podcast releases, blog posts, and other bits of inspiration and motivation delivered straight to your inbox so you don't guts to worry about missing a thing. And with that, I encourage you to keep moving forward, keep chasing adventure, and just get outside and run from the norm.
Check that mic, make sure it sound right, boy.